The two final days of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's official visit to South America concluded in Brasilia, Brazil, where the UN chief met with Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff at the Planalto Palace on Thursday, discussing issues on the international agenda in closed meetings. The UN chief also met with Brazil's chief ministers, including a joint press conference with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Antonio Patriota, where Mr. Ban said that Brazil is in a very strategically good position to make a consensus between the developed and developing countries.
I'm very grateful to people and government of Brazil for their strong commitment and leadership role they have been demonstrating in dealing with world peace and security, regional integration, development, and the promotion of values and goals of the United Nations, including human rights.
Mr. Ban also met with UN officials in Brazil and civil society representatives, then went on to meet with the President of the Federal Senate, José Sarney, among other congressional leaders, discussing local and international issues. Mr. Secretary General, you've stated your priorities in this regional visit to South America. What would you like to see mobilized after you leave here for these countries with the United Nations?
I'd like to strengthen the further cooperation between South American states. During my visit to 4 South American states, including Brazil, I have noticed that there is much more room for further strengthen the role, bigger role by South American states in United Nations, and likewise United Nations can play even bigger role in this region. And I appreciate the Brazilian government's strong commitment for peace and security, and particularly promoting South and South cooperation. I think it would be desirable for emerging economies like Brazil to contribute to this furthering South-South cooperation. Of course, that does not mean that the North-South traditional cooperation should be weakened. That should not be the case. There is a very important dimension of helping poor people by emerging countries. And I'm also very much encouraged by such a strong commitment for furthering and the promotion of human rights by Brazilian government and the gender empowerment. Brazil can send a clear example by having President Dilma Rousseff as a president. I hope this message can be heard loud and clearly to outside the world.
In his meeting with Brazil President Rousseff, the SG noted that President Rousseff will be the first woman in the history of the United Nations to open this year's General Assembly high-level debate in September. The UN chief thanked Brazil for promoting regional integration and South-South cooperation, as well as the president's leadership in the area of disarmament. Turning to issues in the Middle East, the UN chief condemned the violence against demonstrators in Syria and called on Syria's president to stop the bloodshed in his country and to engage in dialogue before it's too late.
The situation in Syria is deeply concerning. I have discussed and talked to President Assad several times on this matter. I have strongly urged him to listen to the wishes and aspirations of their people, and he should take all utmost care to protect the human lives. It is totally unacceptable that many civilian people peacefully demonstrating to have their genuine wishes for greater freedom and democracy have been killed and wounded.
Meanwhile, in New York, the UN Security Council unanimously recommended Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for a second 5-year term. In response here in Brazil, Mr. Ban said that he is deeply honored by the decision of the 15-member body and grateful for the confidence and support.
I'm deeply honored by the unanimous vote of the Security Council to recommend me to the General Assembly for a second term as Secretary General.
And added that he is keen to the formidable challenges ahead. The UN chief wrapped up his agenda in Brazil with visits to the Ministries of Social Development and Environment before heading back to New York on Friday. Mr. Ban kindly thanked Brazilian officials as well as police forces who guided his visit. The Secretary General's 7-day regional visit to South America encompassed official visits to Colombia, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. The Secretary General promised that the United Nations would work to ensure the success of the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, also known as Rio+20, to be held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, next year. Afaf Kanja for South South News, reporting from the capital of Brazil, Brasilia.